Okay, what's a corporation and why do you need to know? Well, first of all, I did a video on partnerships, and I'm going to leave a link right up here in the upper right-hand corner that talks about partnerships. Partnerships and corporations kind of go hand in foot when we're studying for our real estate exam. So when you're done with this video, make sure that you watch that video, and I'm also going to put a link to that video at the very end of this video as well. But corporations, partnerships, limited liability companies are also called LLCs. Single people, married people. When you're a real estate professional, you're going to deal with all different types of clients. And so you have to be at least a little bit familiar with each one of them. Now, we just discussed what partnerships are. So now we're going to talk about the types of corporations. And now a corporation is a legally taxable entity. All right. And it's created by law. And here's the thing. A corporation is considered an individual person, which is distinctly different from the partnership. So that corporation is considered one person and it's treated as one person, okay? Now, number two, corporations, they have rules that you have to follow. So if you create a corporation, you're going to have shareholder meetings every year. You're going to have maybe a meeting of the board of directors where you elect officers. You got to have a president and a vice president and a secretary and a treasurer, even if they're all the same person. One person can create a corporation and be all four of those things, okay? And then there's certain reports that may be required to be filed with your state regulatory body. All of these things are very important, as we're going to talk about in a little bit, to ensure that you're operating as a corporation for that liability protection. All right. Now, a corporation in its raw form is what we call a C corporation. And a C corporation is different from an S corporation. And we're going to discuss both of those a little bit later. A corporation is either foreign or domestic. Now, a domestic corporation simply means that they're only doing business in the state in which they were incorporated. If they're going to do business outstate, let's say in a different state, then they're going to be considered a foreign corporation. And then corporations can be public, private, or nonprofit. So you could have a private foreign corporation, or a private foreign C corporation, or a private foreign S corporation. All right. Now, a public corporation is actually a city, a town, a village. You know, the city of Los Angeles is a public corporation. So that's kind of interesting as well. And then lastly, number 6, corporations will remain in effect. They don't dissolve when a shareholder dies. Partnerships, it can terminate the partnership. With corporations, it continues to live on. Because remember, a corporation issues shares to its shareholders. And when somebody dies, those shares are then either through will or through descent goes to heirs and those type of things. So the corporations continue after a shareholder death. All right, so now let's discuss the advantages and the disadvantages of forming a corporation, or what we call incorporating. The first one is the shareholder of that corporation is not liable for the debt that corporation incurs. Now, having said that, here's something you have to know. Let's say you go out and create a Subchapter S, or a sub S corporation is what it's called. And let's say that you want to get a credit card or take out a loan. Now, the bank could allow you to sign on behalf of that corporation, and then that corporation is solely liable for the debt. But banks want a lot of collateral, and they want as many people as possible to be responsible for the debt. So what you can do is get the debt in the name of the corporation, but most of the time, the bank is going to want you as the authorized signator authority for that corporation to sign personally for that loan. So if the corporation defaults on that credit card payment, then they can come back to you personally. So essentially, the bank most of the time is going to want you to co-sign for that credit card for the corporation that you've created. Now, understand companies like IBM. They're so big and they have, that doesn't apply to them. But for the smaller corporations, it does. And it takes a long time before banks will typically allow a corporation to be responsible for their own debt without any kind of guarantees from any of the signatures. Okay, so another advantage, only liable for the loss of their initial investment. Another advantage is individuals can purchase shares and receive profits through dividend distributions and K1s and those type of things. Another advantage is there could be 1,000 shareholders, but 1, 2, or maybe 3 are the decision maker. They're the ones making the decisions, regardless of how many shareholders there are. And then personal injuries are the responsibility of the corporation. Now, caveat, remember in our last slide, I said it is so important that if you have an S corporation or even a C corporation, it is so important for you to follow the rules of having the annual shareholder meeting and having your annual election of officers and having minutes and making sure those minutes are correctly logged and those type of things. That is so important because there's this thing called piercing the corporate veil. One of the things that we love about being a corporation is it gives you and me, I do own a S corporation, and it provides me liability protection in case I get sued. But when I get sued, that attorney is going to make sure that I followed the rules and I had my annual shareholder meeting and I did all that, because if I screwed up in one little area, that gives ammo for that attorney to go in and pierce the corporate veil and then come after my own assets. That's why it is so important that when you create these corporations that you follow the rules of the state. Be anal retentive about it. All right, what are the disadvantages? And I listed 3 on there. It can be cost prohibitive. Putting a S corporation together or a C corporation or a nonprofit, it can be very expensive to do. C corporations, the problem with C corporations is there's double taxation. So when revenue comes in, it's taxed at the corporate level, then the remaining balance is passed through the shareholders, and then it's taxed again. So there's double taxation. And then corporations are subject to more regulation by state and local governmental bodies than partnerships and sole proprietors typically. Now, real quickly, a sole proprietor is just if I wanted to start up a window washing company, it would just be Paul's Window Washing Company. I'm operating under my own individual Social Security number. I'm not a corporation. I'm not a limited liability company. I'm not a partnership. It's just me. That's what a sole proprietor is. All right, so let's talk about what we used to be called a Subchapter S corporation. Now they're just called S Corps or S corporations. They are distinctly different than C corporations. Number one is you avoid the double taxation. So when revenue comes into the corporation, if it's an S Corp, then what happens is it just passes through the corporation. It goes straight to the shareholders, and then the shareholders pay taxes on it. So it's only taxed once. You're limited to a maximum of 35 shareholders. A C corporation, you can have as many shareholders as you want, but a S corporation can only have a maximum of 35. But just like a C corporation, that corporation can be structured where only 1 or 2 people make all the decisions. Number 3, shareholders must be a U.S. citizen or legal U.S. resident. Number 4, S Corps can only be domestic. They cannot be foreign corporations. And then number 5, there's only one type of stock that's issued. Think about IBM, that's an S Corp or a C corporation. They have preferred stock. They have common stock. They have bonds that are issued, those type of things. S corporations can only have one type of stock. Now, hold on before you go. Don't forget, it's real important that you watch the video on partnerships, because corporations and partnerships kind of go hand in foot here. So you have to know these two. So here is a link to the partnership video. Highly suggest you watch it. If you have not subscribed to the channel, please do so. Click on the little circle to my left. Comments and questions, please, love those things. Put them down below in the comment section. And that's it for today's video. I'll see you in the next video.